we're back for episode 11 of Standpoint. I'm Gabe Groisman, and I'm excited to have my friend Enes Kanter Freedom with us today. And it's fortuitous that this is episode 11. Enes wore the number 11. He had an 11-year NBA career. He's still a free agent with the NBA. Drafted third, if I'm not mistaken.
In 2011.
In 2011, oh my gosh, by the Utah Jazz. Played in Oklahoma City, New York, Portland Trailblazers, the Celtics, back and forth with the Celtics. As a big Larry Bird fan, I like seeing you in that uniform. We're going to talk basketball. We're also going to talk a little bit about, or a lot about, the big piece of your life, which is being an outspoken person who speaks for what you deem is right, the things that are important to you, a lot against the president of Turkey, Erdogan, and his dictatorship there, a lot against China and the issues in China with the Uyghurs, and you had a big clash with the NBA and their love affair with China, and your position on that, and a lot of other fun issues. We've met before. We've hung out before. We've spent time actually in Israel together, and we'll explore all that. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so first of all, it's nice to see you in Miami. It was nice to welcome you with my family this last week for dinner, and it's nice, and for me, normal, and I'm Jewish, you're Muslim, have you over for Shabbat dinner, traditional Friday night dinner with my family and kids. My wife was out of town, but how was that experience for you?
Oh my God, I get so excited and whenever I go to a Shabbat dinner because it's so similar to what we had in Turkey. Because after coming to America, the people don't really sit down and eat dinner as families. So it's a really nice tradition to go to a house where they, sitting down, praying first over the food, and then, be thankful for the food and the blessing we have, and then break bread together. I think it's an amazing tradition. Every time I go there, go to a Shabbat dinner, I remember of my family and the dinners we had back in Turkey. So to me, it's very... I mean, it's an amazing food, but at the same time, it's very emotional. So I love Shabbat dinners.
Yeah, well, we loved having you, and it's interesting. We talk a lot on the show and also just with my friends about the importance of family and community and in our society, how there's really like a real pushback against family and religion and community. And when you experience it, it all falls by the wayside because you realize the beauty of it. You sit down, you have that check-in. So for me, Shabbat, Friday night dinner, by the way, and I remember, in the black community, it's a lot. And Sunday nights, there's family Sunday night dinners. And every community sort of has this. But when you have that weekly check-in, no cell phones, no telephones, no TVs, no computers, and you just sit and check in with your family and thank God.
Discipline.
Yeah.
That's definitely a discipline. You got a lot of distractions. Now, the phones, the apps, and TikToks and this, but now it's time for family time. You sit down, break bread together, pray, and actually have a conversation with one another. So I think it's an amazing tradition.
Yeah, the best thing that my wife, before we dive into other things, that my wife implemented in our family years ago, which is pretty amazing with our 5 kids, is we sit around on Saturday morning, which is also Shabbat. It's 25 hours from Friday night sundown to Saturday night sundown, and it's tell me 3 things you're thankful for this week, and 3 good things that happened to you this week. And it's this incredible exercise because it focuses and trains you to look at the positive, right? I'm sure a lot of bad things happened this week, but tell me the good things that happened this week. And just having that type of tradition, I think, is critical for our family and for just in general for families.
Yeah, I love it, man. I think it's an amazing tradition. I'm looking definitely forward to being invited more.
For sure. And I need to be invited when you get married and have kids to your family, to whatever dinner you guys have in your tradition.
I might be waiting for a while.
Oh, come on. Anyways, we can't get into that. So first, let's talk basketball a little bit before we get into your activism and all these other incredible issues. I'm a huge basketball fan.
Okay.
Grew up playing ball. I thought it was great, but it turns out it was just high school, and then the world gets much tougher after that. But what was it like for you playing in the NBA, just from a basketball level first, and just getting into that speed of basketball?
I played professional basketball and overseas. As a 16-year-old, it was unbelievable, a lot of experience, and then came here for high school, and it's very actually interesting because so in overseas you start to get paid when you're like 14, 15 years old. So I was literally getting paid, but it's normal. So I came here back in 2009, and the high school league pretty much said you're not allowed to play. And I was like, why? They said, well, because you're professional. Anyway, and then I skipped high school, went to prep school, went there for 1 year, then I tried to go to college. I signed with, I think is one of maybe the best basketball program in America, Kentucky. I'm sure you know Coach
Of course.
Cal, Kentucky, Big Blue Nation.
Jamal
It was-
Mashburn.
Exactly. It was unbelievable. But then NCAA came back to me and said, you're not allowed to play college basketball. I was like, why? They said, well, because you took some money. I was like, I literally turned down millions of dollars to came here, go to school, get my education, play basketball at the same time. They said, well, you're permanently ineligible. I was not even allowed to practice with the team
Wow.
in the beginning. So they made me an assistant coach. So I think I was the youngest assistant coach in NCAA history.
So you were an assistant coach in Kentucky.
Yep.
Didn't get to play.
No, 18 years old. I couldn't even practice in the beginning, but then they made me an assistant coach. There's this rule. So I started to practice. I sit down with Coach Cal. He's like, listen, you're still part of our family. We don't want you to leave. Let's stay here. Focus on your job is to make your teammates better now. So I literally was practicing every day. And then after that, I went to school for 1 year. My classes actually were amazing. And then I got drafted by Utah Jazz in 2011.
How many years did you play for Utah?
3.5 years. I think it was a very amazing experience because Utah, I'm sure a lot of Mormons, amazing people. A lot of my friends got drafted to cities like Miami, LA, and New York and stuff, but they got a lot of distractions, So they were out of the league literally for 3-4 years. But just because of Utah, everything shuts down at like 8 p.m. Maybe if you're lucky 8 p.m. 7 to 8 p.m. So I literally just all I care about was just playing basketball.
And you don't drink, and they don't drink there either.
I don't drink. I don't party. I don't go to clubs or bars. So that's why I always try to take care of my body.
Yeah. So I've spent a lot of time in Utah, and you try to get a drink in Utah, it's a whole, they can only serve you one shot at a time. You can't get two.
Exactly.
You can't order a second drink and keep it on your table. But it's a beautiful place, and I'm sure it's a great experience. And also to be able to play where, for me, in the years I grew up, John Stockton and Karl Malone, and sort of the classic basketball, right? Not the flash that you had in other teams, but just classic good basketball.
Utah for me was a really good beginning because I had, I'm sure you know these names, but I had as a veteran I have Al Jefferson, Paul Millsap, Mehmet Okur, and other Turkish players. So I had some really good mentors who actually really cared about me. I don't know how much you know about the rookie hazing. So as a rookie, when you come into the league for the first time, they pretty much like to keep you humble, they haze you. So I literally had to carry pink backpacks everywhere. I had to serve food and drinks in a plane. I had to carry their bags and stuff. They hazed me so much. They pour ice cold water on me many times and hide my phone and clothes. They actually made me sign a contract. They said every time you forget to bring donuts in practice in the morning, you have to pay $500 fine. Even in the road games, I had to wait. We did not have Uber Eats back then, so I had to wake up early, find a cab, and then go find a donut shop, bring donuts for practice, and that was our breakfast. So that's why we couldn't do that well that year. Anyway, but it was so much fun, obviously.
So you're a young Turkish kid. How old are you? 20 years old then?
19.
Not even 19, right?
Yeah.
So you're 19 years old,
19.
running around the country buying donuts for your NBA team. Sort of,
Exactly.
I guess it worked, humbling you, because one side you probably had this building well-deserved ego. I made it to the NBA, and the other side you're out there buying donuts in in Milwaukee.
I think it's important because think about you getting drafted as a teenager. Literally, you're 19 years old, and then the whole world, whole state, America talks about you. And I was a third pick. Literally, the whole world knew who I was, and then everywhere you walk, people know who you are and stuff. So sometimes it's hard to keep yourself humble. But this kind of this kind of little hazings and stuff, put you in your place.
Let's talk about the flip side of it. A lot of people today, we're talking about foreigners in this country, etc., migration, immigration, legal, not legal. Obviously, that wasn't an issue for you, but you were a Turkish person, teenager, coming to the U.S., joining a new culture. I've heard you talk about this before, but I'd love to hear about how you were welcomed here. What was the experience like coming to the United States, going into the NBA, meeting with different folks?
Of course. I think that everything started when I was 9 years old. So in Turkey, if you are a politician, not only in Turkey but Middle East, if you're a politician, if you want to be elected again, unfortunately many politicians using religion to brainwash people, and the the base is so uneducated. They're like, wow, look at our leader. He's standing tall against America, tall against Israel, tall against Jewish and Christian people. Let's vote for him. And politicians are using that. So growing up, I remember there was this propaganda all over TV, social media. We didn't have social media back then, but like, the internet, I will say. Internet, newspaper, and all over. The politicians will keep attacking America, keep attacking Israel, keep attacking, Christian people. And just because of everything is controlled by the government, you don't get any kind of fresh news, no
ulterior views,
exactly.
no alternate views.
All you hear is propaganda all day. So I remember I was 9 years old. I went downstairs to play with my friends. What I have seen that day shocked me so much. My friends were not even teenagers. They were burning flags. They were burning American flags. They were burning Israeli flags. They were breaking crosses. I remember asking one of my best friends, actually, he was my best friend. I was like, what are you guys doing? They said, well, that's what we've seen on TV. We should hate America. We should hate Israel, hate Jewish people. They're devils. They're baby eaters, blood drinkers, and they were breaking crosses. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. They gave me a flag to burn it.
Wow.
They gave me a flag. They gave me a lighter. They said, burn it. I got so nervous, I just didn't know what to do. So I threw the flag down. I ran upstairs to my mom. I was like, Mom, my friends are telling me to hate America, hate Jewish people, hate Christian people. What do I do? My mom said, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but do not hate anyone before you meet them. So that day, I gave a promise to my mom. I was like, Mom, I promise I'm not going to hate anyone before I meet them. I don't know how much you know Middle East, but this doesn't happen in Turkey, but some of the other, countries, in schools, front of classes, you have an American flag and you have Israeli flag. And if you're like a student, a kid, if you don't step on those flags, you're not allowed to attend the class. And if you don't step on those flags, then you will get bullied by your, teammates, classmates, even from your teachers. So that is the environment that I grew up in. And then it was getting more and more toxic every day. My dad is like, enough is enough. You're going to America. I remember asking my dad, I was like, Dad, are you sure you want me to go to America? Because America is like a devil's nest. That in a lot of people's eyes, they said, go ahead and see yourself. I said, okay. So as a 17-year-old, I remember my flight was about to land in Chicago for the first time. I am so nervous. At the same time, I'm excited. And then my flight landed, and then I was like, that's America.
And what was the contrast to you? What did you find versus what you were told you were going to find?
Whew. I remember first time that I landed, I had a lot of teammates, and obviously I never even met, forget about another religion, but I never even met a black person before. I landed, and I remember trying to have this I went to practice, and the two of my teammates tried to have a conversation with me. And I turned around and left the locker room because I just didn't know what to expect. And then I remember the promise. I went back in the locker room. I was like, what's up? They said, well, we know that you in America for the first time. It was New York, sorry, it wasn't Chicago. We know that, you're American. You came to America for the first time. You are Muslim. Would you like to go to a mosque? We can take you. And I was like, excuse me? They said, yes, we know that, you're Muslim. We can go get halal food for you if you like. And that was the first question that I had in my mind. I'm like, this is not what I have learned in Turkey. And then I remember meeting with a friend, which she didn't tell me she was Jewish. I don't think I would be friends with her, to be honest with you, because as a 17-year-old coming here for the first time, meeting with Americans, yes, but meeting with someone who's Jewish, like next step, for me, I was not ready for it. And I became really good friends with her. I'm talking.
And here you are sitting on a podcast with someone who's your friend wearing a kippah.
Exactly. Yeah. So she said, like we had we become really good friends. And then later on, she said, well, why don't you, come to my house for a Shabbat dinner? I was like, what's a Shabbat dinner? They said, well, that, we come every Friday night, we, break bread, we pray and all that stuff. I'm like, what's a Shabbat dinner? They said, well, we're Jewish. Hang up the phone. And that night, I don't know if I maybe slept a couple hours. I was like, I cannot believe I had a conversation with a Jew before. I never had before, you know. Anyway, so then I called her back in the morning because I was like, I give a promise to my mom. I cannot break that promise. I called her. I was like, okay, I'm coming. Before I went to her house, I called one of my Turkish friends who lives in America. I said, listen, I'm going to one of my friends' house. He said, okay. He said, well, she's Jewish. And he's like, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Blah, blah. He said, if you don't hear from me for the next 2 hours, call the police. I went to her house. It was so amazing. You know, her mom knew that I was Turkish, so she bought some like Turkish delights. We had some amazing conversation. We prayed together, and then I did my own prayer actually, and they were very respectful. So, and then, they drink a little wine.
Yeah.
And they said, listen, we know that you're Muslim, so here's a grape juice. So I drink your grape juice. I was like, see, this is so interesting, That day after the Shabbat dinner, I left the house. I got so emotional because I was like, wow, whatever I have learned in the last 17 years, delete. Everything was false. So there are millions of kids in the Middle East growing up anti-Semitic, anti-West, anti-American just because of those hate speeches coming from these politicians. I was like, we gotta change that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Justin, do you mind grabbing the AC? It's a little hot in here. Thank you so much. It's incredible that the false narratives that are taught, the brainwashing that's taught, and the level in which it's taught all over the world, frankly. And we have we're experiencing that here in the U.S. with the takeover of our education system by a lot of the left and the far left, the radical left in our country, and a lot of folks are fighting back, like Moms for Liberty and different groups that today are seen as extremist groups somehow for standing up for parents' rights. I'm sure in 3 or 4 years that's going to be mainstream because people are not going to accept that. But in the Middle East, it's been happening forever. And it's interesting because a country like Turkey, in the U.S., we see Turkey in general as a country that has one foot on one side of the fence and one on the other. One in the Arab world, one in quote-unquote Europe in their quest to join the EU. Yeah. It's not like Libya, right, where people think Turkey, they think Istanbul, this beautiful, developed country. It's not going to be so bad.
Which it is. I mean, I don't know if you guys, whoever's watching this, I don't know if they ever been to Turkey before or Istanbul. It's one of the most beautiful country, one of the most beautiful city in the world. And I talk about a lot of the problems that are happening over there. Sometimes people get it wrong. I love Turkey. I love my country. I love my flag. I love my people. My problem is with the current regime in Turkey. So Turkey actually could have been a bridge of Islam and West, but just because of all this stuff happening right now, it's impossible. I mean, Turkey literally is the first country after October 7th came out and publicly supported Hamas. As a Turk, I was like, I cannot believe it. They brought 1.5 million, protesters, and they all were saying that, well, we support Hamas. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is crazy.
And it's the same country that the U.S. sells arms to and F-16s to, and everyone begs
NATO ally.
A NATO ally. Everyone begs to make peace with them. Yeah. There's a series of countries like that in the Middle East that successfully seem to play both sides. Qatar comes to mind, right? That kind of funds Hamas, funds and houses the leaders of Hamas, which Turkey did before. Has Al Jazeera, which is the biggest purveyor of anti-Semitism in the world, likely if you're looking by actual anti-Semitic blood libels. Yet the U.S. has 12,000 service members there, and they're lauded as this great peacemaker when they're not.
We just give, I believe, 50 F-16s to Turkey. I mean, blackmail is the new negotiation, because I don't know, I'm sure you know, Turkey said, I'm only going to let Sweden in if you'll give me F-16s. And I'm like, what is Erdogan going to do with those F-16s? He's going to take it, he's going to harass Armenia, harass Greek people, he's going to maybe even fund those to some of the terrorist groups out there, because this is facts. I mean, you go on internet right now, Erdogan got caught sending weapons and arms to ISIS. And I'm like, how can you trust this dictator? I'm really shocked. And then I had a lot of conversation with some of the people in our administration. I'm like, listen, with the soft talks and condemning with this dictatorship, it's not going to work, because they're going to use it with their own for their own benefits. And I said it many times. Erdogan is the Trojan horse for Putin in NATO. So if you think about it a little bit, you're gonna realize that that is a true statement.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. But the U.S. seems to have a blind spot with Turkey. It's one of many blind spots that we have in our foreign policies.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the war in Israel, like you said, they immediately supported Hamas, which is not surprising. You know, they had the Mavi Mara, I think I'm saying it right, the boat that they sent over to provoke the blockade in Gaza, and there was the big incident, big diplomatic incident as a result. It's just a chain of a lot of different provocations. How did you become, you're known today as much for your basketball and for your activism as you are for your activism. You know, how is it that you started? I've heard you say, you don't have to say it again, everyone's heard you, where you said, we have this platform, I have to use it to speak out. But tell us a little bit about, help me understand where you come from within Turkey, where it is that, why you, whether you're specifically being targeted by Erdogan, meaning your family, your community, or if it's just in general against the Turkish regime.
So I think it all started back in 2013. There was a big corruption scandal happening in Turkey. President Erdogan and some of his family members were involved in it. And I mean, he pretty much got caught. I mean, he has his recordings and his tapes everywhere, all around YouTube. So after that, whoever talked about this corruption scandal, he put him in jail. Journalists, you write, you're in jail. Media outlet, you talk about it, you'll be shut down. And I'm like, I don't care who you are, but if you're fighting against free media, I'm going to say something about it. So I literally put a simple tweet out there. Because of the NBA platform, it became a conversation in the United States, in Turkey, and actually Middle East. And I'm like, even one simple tweet can inspire that many people. From now on, I'm going to pay attention about what's going on in my country more and more. So I remember, my teammates were going out, having fun, going to bars and whatever. I was going back to my room and start to study about the foreign relations, the relation between America and Turkey, what's happening in the Middle East and stuff. So I started to speak up. The more I speak up, because of the NBA platform, it was becoming a conversation, and many of the media outlets wanted to give me a platform. So I started to talk about it. And every time I say something, just because it was becoming a conversation, Turkish government hated that. So they literally try to do everything they can to silence me. First, I mean, my dad was literally one of the most successful scientists in Turkey. First they fired him. And then my sister, she went to medical school for 6 years and she still cannot find a job. I think the saddest one was my little brother, because he wanted to be like his big brother, playing basketball in NBA, but because of the same last name, he was, getting kicked out in every team. So they were getting affected so much they had to put a statement out there and said, we are disowning Enes. And I remember going to a practice that day. It was probably one of the toughest days in my life, because my teammates are looking at me, looking at my eyes, and want to ask you if I'm okay, but just because of it's so personal, they just didn't want to ask. And then after that, statement, Turkish government didn't believe them. They sent police to my house in Turkey, and they raided the whole house, and they took every electronics away. Phones, computers, laptops, iPads, because they wanted to see if I am still in contact with my family or not. They couldn't find no evidence, but they still took my dad in jail for a while. But we put so much pressure from here with media and politicians to Turkey, they had to let him go.
How long was he in jail?
A while. I'm trying to remember, because right now, just because they publicly disown me, there's no communication between me and my family. But I remember asking, so my brother plays basketball overseas now. I was literally talking to him every day and say if my dad is okay, if he's out yet. And it was just every day when he tell me like, nope, not yet. So it was breaking my heart. So a while. And then after that, things got even more crazy. I have now 12 arrest warning for me in 11 years. They revoked my passport. They put my name on Interpol list. I can only go to 29 countries in the world. If I go to a country, and if that country has an extradition deal with Turkey, then I'm back in Turkey, and you will never hear from me ever again.
Just for speaking out against the regime. I mean,
Even
that in and of itself tells the story of
even,
Turkey,
even like
or a Verda one.
if you can read all my op-eds or listen every interview that I have done so far, I don't talk about politics because I'm not a politician. What I care about is human rights. So I talk about the human rights violations and political prisoners over there. Even that pissed off the Turkish government. Just recently, actually, it's a very crazy story. I was in Vatican. I did a basketball camp over there for Muslims, Jews, and Christians. And the next day, I met the Pope. I put it on social media. It was literally everywhere because of, who I met, because of the Pope. Literally that day, they put a bounty on my head. I talked to FBI. They said, listen, this can get very, very ugly because this is now going to trigger some mafia, some very bad people out there. So wherever you are, come back to US immediately. So literally the next day, I took a flight, went back to Turkey, went back to America, and now pretty much every city or state I go to, I had to call one of my friends and say, listen, this is where I'm going, and let me know if it's okay.
So why don't we talk a little bit about the main human rights violations that you see in Turkey that caused you to just decide, I got to speak out about this?
So right now, every social media, pretty much, newspaper, channels, media is controlled by the government. If you are an anchor or if you are, a journalist, and if you say anything against the Turkish government, then you'll be in jail the next day. But if you're outside of Turkey and you write anything against the government or the Erdogan himself, they're going to put your name on Interpol list. I think it's unacceptable because many countries out there like Iran, Russia, I believe China too, uses Interpol system to hunt their opponents because it's the easiest way to get them back to country. And
for people who don't know what that is, Interpol has basically an international warrant system where if you show up at any of these countries, it's an agreement between those countries that you're going back, you'll be deported to that country. And dictators, just to explain for people who don't know, dictators use it often, and authoritarians will use it often for political opponents or for people that shouldn't be on the list. And that way, if they travel anywhere in the world, they get picked up, and it's just sort of a way to suppress speech.
So
and more.
So I think the last numbers, I'm trying to think about the last numbers. I believe there are 17,000 innocent women are in jail and over 1,000 infants with their mother. And there are a lot of reports out there, like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Human Rights Foundation, saying that these women are getting tortured in jails. I don't want to go into details because I don't know the age group that watching this, but it's very ugly in there. So I talk about those innocent people, and I talk about, all the human rights violations, and that, makes me a terrorist.
So in exchange for speaking out on the human rights violations that you saw in your own country in Turkey, you basically got excommunicated by your family because they had to save their own lives, right? Your family themselves face some serious consequences. We'll get into your issues with the NBA, with other issues that might be more even China related than Turkey related. Before we get to China and the NBA, was it worth it?
Good question. A lot of people are asking me this question, actually. Even like after this whole NBA thing happened, they're like, dude, you lost your career. I'm like, forget about my career. I pretty much lost my family. I haven't seen them over 10 years now. Obviously, my family comes before everything. My mom and my dad, and my siblings, obviously, one of the most precious things to me. But people need to understand my story is only one. There are thousands of stories. Just because they're not NBA players, you guys don't know them. Thousands of stories. They're way worse than mine. So what I'm trying to do is I'm using my story to tell about others. It did cost me a lot because think about it. Like, you want to stand up for the wrong things that are happening in your country, and you pretty much lost your family. And I think that was my mom's biggest dream, to come to one of my game in NBA, and she never did. So
listen, and there's only one way to lead your life, in my opinion, which is true to who you are and true to your values and true to your people and true to yourself. And you've done that, especially related to Turkey and related to the issues that you saw there in your country. And life, God willing, is long, and before we move on to the next, I say to you from my heart, I hope that there's a time you get to reunite with your family soon.
That's the goal, man.
And
I hope so, because like I said again, it would be nice for even, I don't think I will be playing basketball ever again because of the things that we're going to talk about in a little, but I will still take her to an NBA game and say, this is the court that I played in,
Yeah, yeah. So we've got an NBA game tonight. This will come out next week, but the Heat against the Pistons, the Heat should take the game easily. But it's a young team, and the young teams sometimes play down to their opponents. So I hope that's not the case. But listen, the big issue that you ended up having with the NBA had to do more with China, right? And the NBA's affiliation with China, and what was it about China, which has its own issues, that caused you to speak out? Is it the Uyghurs and the situation there with them? Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
I want to actually, I don't think I told the story anywhere. I want to give you like a long answer to it.
Sure.
So I think it was in 2019. Daryl Morey, the general manager of Houston Rockets, tweeted something and said, "Stand with Hong Kong." It became maybe the biggest mess for the NBA, because NBA, obviously, I'm sure you know, that always cares about social justice, actually pushes and encourages their players to talk about the problems we have in this country, especially 2020 when they took us to NBA bubble during COVID. Even they said, do not talk about basketball. Every interview that you do is going to be about social justice. They even put these BLM logos on the floor and phrases behind our jersey, which was controlled by the NBA. So if I wanted to pick stand with Taiwan, free Uyghurs, you're not allowed. Only the ones that they pick. Anyway, so people were taking knees and protesting the country and the flags and all that stuff. And I'm like, listen, we live in America. You have a right to protest. This is your freedom of protest. You can say whatever you want to say unless it harms anyone. So when Daryl Morey tweeted that, I was playing for Boston Celtics. I remember our assistant GM walked in the huddle and said, guys, listen. Everybody knows that what Daryl Morey tweeted. Do not say a word about it. And I'm like, what? We live in America. So you're literally telling us to shut up. Brad Stevens, the coach, the head coach, turned around and said, no. We live in America. They can say whatever they want to say, but be ready for the consequences. And I'm like, wow. They were literally telling us that if we talk about this, it's going to come with some very heavy consequences. Anyway, so 2020 happened.
It sounded like a challenge to you, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So 2020 happened. It was all about social justice, and all these players were putting on their shoes like Black Revolution, Black Lives Matter, Breonna Taylor, I Can't Breathe and stuff. I said, okay. So there is no rule against it. Literally around a year later, 2021-22 season, in the summertime before the season, I'm doing a basketball camp. Actually, I was doing a basketball camp with Hakeem Jeffries in his district. So we had an amazing basketball camp, and after the basketball camps, all the kids just lined up in front of me. And I remember that there's this one kid. He took a picture, and his dad called me out in front of everybody and said, how can you call yourself a human rights activist when your Muslim brothers and sisters are getting tortured and raped every day in concentration camp in China? I'm still smiling for the camera, for his kid. I took a picture, I turned around to that parent, I was like, I promise I'm going to get back to you. So that day I canceled everything. I went back to my hotel, I started to study. What I have read on the internet just shocked me so much, I was like, that cannot be true. And I'm like, even if this cannot be true, because if this is true, why is no one talking about it? I called my manager, I was like, I need you to find me a concentration camp survivor. So he found me one. It was a lady. We sit down. We had this 1 hour conversation. She was telling me about all the torture methods. And I'm sorry I'm saying this, but gang raping. She was telling me about the forced sterilization and abortion and organ harvesting. At the end of our conversation, I asked her, okay, you got me. What can I do to help? She said, I don't need your help. I'm like, so we just had this 1 hour conversation for no reason? She said, no. I live in America. I live an amazing life here. I can do whatever I want. I can say or eat whatever I want. Help those 3 million Uyghurs who are in concentration camp getting tortured every day. So that day, I promised myself, whatever it takes, I'm going to talk about this, people. Because literally no one is talking about it.
Still today, nobody's really talking about it. It comes up and then it goes away. So tell me, what's the NBA's relationship with China? I mean, from the outside, we see that they air the games there, the TV. They make a lot of money on TV there. What's the relationship there?
I believe $5 billion. And
is that more than what they make in the U.S. for TV?
More people watch NBA games in China than American population. So think about the market. Think about the jersey sales, the shoe sales.
More people watch the NBA in China than the American population. So over 330 million people watch it just last year.
So I wanted to do it in a way. I mean, I could have just go out there and tweet about it and say free Uyghurs. I wanted to, I could have just do an interview about it and put it out there. But I wanted to do it in a way where I'm going to inspire millions of kids out there. Every kid in the world going to hear about this topic.
So you put it on your sneakers.
So I'm sure you were a basketball fan growing up. When you're a kid, when I was a kid, waking up like 3, 4 a.m. in the morning, the first thing I was watching was the shoes.
Yeah.
What color they are, if they're comfortable, what brand. And the next day, I was waking up and telling my dad, please buy those shoes for me. So every kid in the world loves shoes. So I came up with this idea. I was like, we are going to create these non-slave labor shoes. And also we are going to reach out to these artists who's been oppressed by their government around the world. And we're going to tell them to put all this oppression, all the stories on the shoes, and we're going to go out there and play basketball. You're a basketball fan. I'm playing for Boston Celtics. Our first game against New York Knicks in Madison Square Garden, opening night for them. Every celebrity you can think of was in that game. It's also nationally televised, so like millions of people are watching this game. My first topic was free Tibet. It's another human rights issue, and I think it's literally it's a cultural genocide pretty much. So I put this message on my free Tibet, shoes on free Tibet, and I went out there and started to warm up. We sang the national anthem. We came in a huddle, 1 minute left before the game started. 2 gentlemen from the NBA that were working for Boston Celtics came up to me and said, take your shoes off. I was like, excuse me? They said, your shoes has been getting so much attention internationally. The game hasn't started yet. You got to take them off. For me, it was the perfect moment because I was just getting ready for my citizenship test. So I was like, okay. I closed my eyes. I'm like, okay, we have 27 amendments in America. I'm our first amendment, freedom of speech. I turned around and said, no, I'm not taking them off. I was like, I'll go tell your boss, even if I get fined, I'm not going to take these off. They said, we're not talking about a fine, buddy. We're talking about getting banned. So they were literally threatening me to get banned. So that first half, I played 0 minutes. I went back to my locker room. I looked at my phone. There was thousands of notifications. I clicked on the one that my manager sent me. He texted me and said, every Celtics game is banned in China. It took them 24 minutes, which I didn't even play. 24 minutes, first quarter 12 minutes, second quarter 12 minutes, 24 minutes to ban every Celtics game on television rest of the year. I went out there, play, join. I want to say join because I didn't play. Joined the second half. We lost the game. I played 0 minutes. It's the first time that I played 0 minutes, which I played every game before that. After the game, I think you can ask my manager. We were literally getting interview requests from every media outlet in the world, every country, even like these like Middle Eastern countries, even from this like they have the news outlets that I've never even heard of. I told my manager cancel everything. He's like, why? They said, I was like, I don't want my teammate to think that I'm doing this for attention. Cancel everything. So after the game, NBPA called me, the Player Association, which I paid thousands of dollars to protect my rights against the NBA. They said, you can now wear those shoes ever again. I was like, am I breaking any rules? Because if I'm remembering correctly, 2 years ago, all these players were put on their shoes, Black Lives Matter, Black Revolution, but now you're telling me to take my shoes off. That is not fair. They said, yeah, but the NBA and China, they pressured me so much. I was like, promise you, I'm not going to wear free Tibet shoes ever again. They said, promise? I said, promise. I hang up the phone. Next game, I wore free Uyghur shoes. They lost their mind. They said, you lied to us. How could you do? I was like, I never lied to you. I never said I'm not going to wear free Uyghur shoes. I just said I'm just not going to wear free Tibet shoes. at that moment they understand that they're not gonna be able to make me apologize or take my tweet down and all that stuff. After the third game for me it was the most important game.
Did you play a second game with the Free Uyghur shoes?
4.5 minutes.
Wow.
The last 4.5 minutes. Because there was so much media pressure on them. So third game, I'm sure you grew up as a Jordan fan.
Of course.
So I come up with this idea, right? The most, I guess, famous shoes that Jordan had was Air Concords. So I'm going to have the shoes, I'm going to put with the big letter, made with slave labor. Play against Charlotte, in Charlotte. Who owns Charlotte? Michael Jordan. So I put the shoes on, I went out there. Literally, everyone at the arena stopped watching the game. They were looking at my shoes. Every camera, the people who were taking pictures, and they were focusing on the shoes. So after the game, my teammates came up to me and said, listen, dude, you know this is your last in NBA. Have fun. Pray that we win a championship, but you're never going to play basketball ever again. You criticize NBA, you criticize Nike, it's over for you. After the third game, my agent called me and said, listen, dude, I work for you, I don't work for the NBA, so I got to be honest with you. If you say another word, might be too late, but if you say another word, you're never going to play basketball in this league ever again. You're 29 years old, you can't play another 6 to 7 years. That means you're about to lose $40 to $50 million. Hang up the phone, never talk to me again.
Wow.
That's it.
And then tell me how the career wound down then? So the year was over.
So
were you were on a year-to-year contract then, or what was your?
So that was my last year. That was your last contract. So it was the perfect moment because it happened right before the Beijing Olympics. So forget about the NBA. I literally try to reach out to MLB, MLS, NHL, even Olympians. I'm like, dude, do not become part of the propaganda. Join me. We'll talk about all the problems that happen over there. They said, listen, man, we love you. I think what you're doing is so amazing, so inspirational, but we just cannot join you. I was like, why? They said, well, we have shoe deals, endorsement deals. We want to get another contract. I asked them one simple question. I was like, put yourself in their shoes. If your mother, if your sister, if your daughter was in those concentration camps getting tortured and raped every day, would you still pick money over, your morals? They usually turn around and leave the room. How could you answer that question?
Right.
February came. I played my last game against Brooklyn Nets. I scored a ball, and the game was over. I actually played that game for some reason. I scored a ball, and then the next day was a trade deadline. They traded me to Houston Rockets, which is known by the, China's team because of Yao Ming, and then they released me after. And then everybody knew that was it. What broke my heart the most, I played 11 years in NBA, hundreds of teammates, so many coaches, assistant coaches. Not one of them texted me after. They said, good luck with whatever comes your way next. Because they knew that if I ever do an interview and if I give their name, which I would never do without their permission, their contract or endorsement deals or shoe deals will be affected. So not even a one text message.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, but listen, you haven't stopped in your mission. You didn't need to maybe use the NBA initially as your platform, but you still have a platform and a growing platform to talk about issues, and you work on so many different things. We spent time together actually last summer in Israel, or maybe 2 summers ago. In Israel, you were doing, amongst other things, you were doing a basketball camp with Tamir Goodman, who people in their 40s like me know as Jewish Jordan. He was in Sports Illustrated, a redhead Jewish kid who was, I think he came out in the year with Carmelo Anthony in that group. Was one of the top players in the country, McDonald All-American. Well, got recruited by Maryland and then ended up switching schools for religious reasons to Yeshiva University. He didn't like it. He moved to Israel to play professional basketball for Maccabi Tel Aviv and then got injured. But he's a really good guy, a good friend. And first tell us a little bit about that camp, why you did it, what it was.
It's actually very funny because, coming here, I was literally open to everything. I really wanted to meet with everyone. I remember I was playing for Boston Celtics, and the Consul General of Israel invited me for a Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I'm like, sure, I'll come and learn and check it out. And I remember, me and him sitting, we actually eating some kosher food. And there's this one lady, she was so old, she's in a wheelchair. So she rolled up, right? She rolled up, she looked up, She's like, I've never seen a Jew this tall before. Everyone started to laugh. I'm like, ma'am, you're so sweet, but I'm not Jewish. She said, what are you? I was like, I'm Muslim. She's like, what are you doing here? I was like, I'm here to learn. So she started to tear up. But I actually, like, it was something weird. I'm like, why would a 90-year-old woman will get a tattoo on her arm? And there was a number. And I'm like, after she left, I asked the concierge, I was like, what is that? She's like, well, she's a Holocaust survivor. And that's the number that she had. I was like, wow, I was blown away, you know?
To state the obvious, there's zero Holocaust education in Turkey, right?
Oh, I promise I didn't even hear about the Holocaust till I was like, what, 23, 24, you know?
Wow.
After hearing that, I'm just like, I don't care about it because I don't even know what it is. But then, you know, with Boston, having conversation with this consul general, I started to learn about it. Actually, after that, we started to give Holocaust initiative in Muslim schools in America. After that, that's a different topic. But then we actually went out to eat with him right after, and he's like, "This is the situation." I was like, "We gotta change that." So I come up with this crazy idea. I was like, "I'm gonna go to Jerusalem, and we're gonna bring Israelis and Palestinians together to play basketball." A lot of people said, you are crazy, don't do that, they're not going to play basketball, they're going to fight. But I was like, you know what, I'm taking that chance. So I went there, and we organized this 2 weeks basketball camp. It was so unbelievable. I remember before I get into the gym, it was in YMCA in Jerusalem. One of the coaches stopped me. I was like, I'm going to tell you a story. I was like, okay, what's up? He said, look at this girl over there. I said, okay. He said, she's Palestinian, and she has an amazing story. I said, tell me about it. When her family heard about that I'm coming to Jerusalem to do a basketball camp, her family said, would you like to go? She said, there is no beep effing way that I'm going to go to Jerusalem and play basketball with Jewish kids. You're crazy. Her family was very well educated. They said, well, I think they were from Ramallah. They said, go there for 1 hour. If you don't like it, we'll take you back. She ended up staying for 2 weeks. End of the first week, she started to apologize from her teammates and say, sorry guys, I just didn't know enough. And after the 2 weeks, she started to exchange numbers, social medias with her, Jewish teammates. I remember I put myself, her, and one of the Jewish kids who was a kippah in the same team. I'm sure you know the basketball terms. So other team missed the shot. I got a rebound. I passed the ball to this Jewish kid. So he crossed someone over. He passed the ball to this Palestinian girl. She scored the ball. And when she's coming back, they high-five each other. I was like, this is the most beautiful scene I've ever seen on a basketball court. And that camp was literally all over social media, all over the country. A lot of people covered that and stuff. And I'm saying this over and over again. I think that is one of the most beautiful places I've ever visited.
Yeah, so first of all, sports has a real way of bringing people together. I did visit the camp, I think 1 day or 2 days with a few friends. It was pretty incredible to see. For those people who don't know, we have a place in Jerusalem. We're there all the time, a few times a year. All over Jerusalem, you see Jews and Arabs together. It's not a panacea. It's not this perfect world, but it's also not what's painted by the world. And the YMCA is a perfect example. If you go, the YMCA, which is in the center of Jerusalem, right in front of the King David Hotel, it has one of the nicest gyms, swimming pools. They have a CrossFit in there, and you can go there, and it's Jews and Arabs. Everyone's working out together. Everyone's hanging out. It's actually one of the spots, and it's right in the middle of Jerusalem. Muslims, Christians, it's a YMCA, and Jews all together there. And again, it's not this like perfect Candyland that I'm trying to kumbaya what's happening in Israel, because I'm not, but it's light years away from what anybody would imagine if you weren't there. Was that your first time in Jerusalem when we were together?
First time ever. I mean, obviously I have seen so many pictures on Google and watched so many YouTubes about it and stuff, but actually being there, you have the Jewish corner, Muslim corner, you have the Christian corner, and you see people actually there just like, it was so amazing for me because I keep it halal and kosher, so in America I cannot eat food everywhere. But when I was there, I'm like, oh my God, I was going crazy because you can literally eat whatever you want.
We went to dinner in Tel Aviv in sort of a Tel Aviv hotspot, and I remember you telling me, I hope it's okay to say it.
Of course, go ahead.
Where you said to me, I'm blown away by how welcoming everyone is to me, right? And
exactly.
Everyone knows who you are. They know you're Muslim. They know you're Turkish, and you were welcomed with open arms.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is not surprising. You're working on doing some more camps now. Didn't you do one now in Texas?
So So I took this camp, right? And that camp and that story really inspired me. And I was like, why don't we come up with this amazing platform, amazing initiative, amazing, basketball camps, and we will build it all around the world. So the name of the sports academy that we are building is Abrahamic Athletic Academy. We will be literally bringing every Abrahamic religion together to play basketball. It's going to be focused on middle schools and high schools. And a lot of people are saying, well, what's the difference between your camp and any other NBA player's camp? So my focus will be, we're going to play basketball, but same time we're going to have 1 hour curriculum every time we play basketball. We're going to talk about very uncomfortable conversations. We're going to talk about, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-Christianism, mental health, healthy lifestyle, and Holocaust education is going to be one of them, because I could care less about basketball. I care about building the next generation. So right now we are thinking about opening these camps, these schools, I will say, in LA, Miami, New Jersey, and Houston. And overseas, we will be opening up in Athens and Jerusalem. And this might be one of the best, initiative that we can come up with that is going to bring people together.
I can tell you, I really like initiatives like this and support them. When people talk about the complex issues in the Middle East, like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, etc., the Israeli-Arab conflict, which is what was called for years when I studied it, and the names change because the situation changes. But everyone always says, what's the solution? Everyone is always, from my perspective, looking for a quick fix, for a piece of paper to sign. But the real solution is a long-term solution where you can change people's education, and people are blind to that. For example, I've been screaming from the rooftops for years about education in the Palestinian school system, and even in the Israeli-Arab school system, where they're teaching kids to hate, and they're teaching that Israel's the enemy, and that all the things you're talking about that you learned in Turkey, they're teaching it there. The harder part is in Israel, the Israeli government's funding it, and in Gaza, it's the UN that's funding it, which is mostly the United States, and people have been talking about it, and they just ignore it. They're like, it's just school books, right? But then 20 years of school books will change a society.
Exactly. I mean, that's why we are focusing on, once the kids get to college, it's so tough to change their mindset, but somehow we can teach these kids about coexisting, universal peace, and love each other, and work as a team to build our future when they're in middle school and high school. I really believe that is the real solution.
So I actually think what's interesting for younger folks, but also for adults, isn't even to focus on solutions of kinds, but just to hear other people's stories, because we all sort of live in these echo chambers, not just politically here in the U.S., but in religious echo chambers, to hear what's the Christian plight in the Middle East, what's the Muslim story, what's the story of the people that live in Israel that are Arabs, right, where they came from, what's their story, what's the way they look at things. We don't even speak the same languages many of the times, and so to be able to have a place where you can just learn and then reach your own conclusions, even doing that, I think will help move the ball forward, no pun intended, but will help move the ball forward to make society better. I can tell you that I consider you a friend. I think you do great things. I've been heartbroken sometimes by some of the things you post, and sometimes I think what happens is there's narratives. So the Jews, from my perspective, we've been fighting so many wars for so many years, right? And one of the biggest ones is the narrative story, right? The blood. We've been victims of a blood. I hate the word victims, but we've been on the receiving end of blood libels since time immemorial, starting with that the Jews killed Jesus Christ, right, and many more that have caused the murder of millions. And the narrative story today with Israel on a day-to-day basis is really tough, because as much as the anti-Semites like to say Jews control the media, and we're here in this podcast, we don't control the media. If we did, the media would look very different, I promise. Everyone would love Israel and the Jewish community and be reporting things great. But I do understand that it's hard. Like, there's one example I was thinking about that I want to talk to. I hope it's okay. And I want to show people you can have respectful conversations with friends, right? Because that's what this show's all about, by the way, not confronting people, talking, just having normal discussions. But I remember, so Ramadan's coming up. In Ramadan, today people are talking about the Israel and Gaza and Hamas, and let's try to get a peace deal before Ramadan, because the world looks at Ramadan as this like peaceful, beautiful time.
Exactly.
If you live in Israel, you know that Ramadan is the most violent month of the year. The more terror attacks happen in Ramadan than any other month. I don't know why, but it's just a reality that happens. Ramadan is a very, very active month in terror. By the way, Hamas already declared, and so did Palestinian Islamic Jihad, like they do every year, that this Ramadan is going to be the bloodiest Ramadan ever, and Israel should be ready. And I'll be there, by the way, during Ramadan for Passover, because I don't let terror dictate my life. I'm going to do what I think is right for my family, just like you do what's yours. But there's something that happens every year. You've been up on the Temple Mount, so have I. I saw a video of you doing a beautiful blessing from up there for peace, wearing a peace shirt of Shalom and Salam. But you know this, every year in Ramadan, there's a group of hooligans, of Arab hooligans, who go into Al-Aqsa, and they bring in with them tons and tons of rocks and fireworks, and they start shooting it out. They barricade themselves and they start shooting outside, right? And by who are they shooting at? They're actually shooting at Arabs that are up there, because Jews aren't allowed to walk in that area religiously. We have to walk in the perimeter, because we're not allowed to step where the temple used to be, right? And that's what was on the Temple Mount. That's why it's called the Temple Mount. So every single year they play the same game. Right, they barricade themselves in. They start shooting rockets, and they start, fireworks at the people directly, and rocks, until the police, who by the way almost are all Arabs that are up on the Temple Mount. There's both, but the ones that tend to Al-Aqsa are all Arabs, and I don't know if Muslims, Christians, or Druze, but Arabs. And eventually the SWAT team goes in and takes them out. I remember you posting very upset about it, saying, I can't be silent anymore. I couldn't even find it, but I was scrolling a little bit before. But I remember when it came out, and I was thinking, and as this happens every year, they say they're going to do it every year just for that narrative. Right. So, what do you think?
So that was my actually first time seeing a video like that, right? And also, but I don't think there's so much misinformation out there. And obviously now, these days, like, we don't read newspaper. We get which is, we need to fix that. And not only myself, but like pretty much like every people who's below 35, we get our source from TikTok, which is the most crazy thing that you can do. And there's so much misinformation out there, so much, so I feel like before we put anything out there, we need to do our research. We need to do, see whatever you put in out there is true or not. So what I will say is, don't get your sources from TikTok or even Twitter or X, whatever you call it, because one side is posting one thing, but you don't know if that is true or not. So what I have learned is, like, make sure that whatever you posted is facts. Don't post it, because you don't know who you're gonna hurt or not. So.
Yeah, I just think, and I appreciate that so much. First of all, I'm over 35, so I have a TikTok account. I don't even know how to open it. Someone else is supposed to post for me. I don't think they're doing it anyways. I did try to get that and Snapchat so I could talk to my teenage girls, and I can't figure out either of them, which is ridiculous. It's just true, and I'm 43. Yeah. I feel like I should be able to do it. I can't, but I do appreciate that, and it is hard, and that's why I honestly do give you the benefit of the doubt. But I think you do so much good work, especially on these things, and the sensitivity that we have in the Jewish community is about, if you meet an active Jewish person on this issue, they always tell you the same thing, I'm sure. Let us take you to Israel. Let us show you, right? And it's because the facts, Israel's not perfect. There's no perfect country in the world. That standard's an impossible standard, right? But it's different than what people see, and we fight sort of in that narrative piece. And then now, so I appreciate that. I do get my news every morning from the Wall Street Journal. I read it in print every day. But even papers like that, look, I'll tell you what I do on Israel News. I read, I follow very closely what happens in Israel. I read every day. It's on apps because I have to work. But I read the right-wing paper in Israel, I read the left-wing paper in Israel, and I read the middle paper in Israel. I have all three of those apps on my phone, and you can read the same story in three different things. And I can tell you, my best friend in law school, some 20-something years ago, was a military analyst for the Middle East, spoke fluent Arabic, actually lived in Turkey, worked in the embassy there for a few years. And when an incident would happen in Israel, we'd read the news, and he would always pull up the Arab news in Arabic.
Okay.
And we would sit there. It was the first time I did this. This is like early 2000s. So there wasn't AI. You couldn't. And he would read in Arabic what they're saying in Arabic about the same incident. And it could be something as big as as obviously one-sided as a suicide bomber in a pizza shop in Jerusalem, and the story in the Arab news was something totally different than what was just sort of in the world news. So it is hard. And now in the war with Hamas, the narrative is really even harder, and the facts are even harder to get, because you hear everyone talking about numbers. The numbers come, the Gaza Health Ministry is just Hamas, right? So when we talk about, I've heard you try to thread the needle a lot on like October 7th, very clear. Any human being who looks at it with the heart and eyes is going to say October 7th was one of the worst atrocities in history: mass rape, gang rapes, mutilations, etc., kidnapping. But then you talk about that I've heard you talk about Israel's intentionally targeting civilians. And I push back on that tremendously, because I know the soldiers there, I know Israel policy, I know the facts on the ground, and I know that it's not the case at all. If Israel were intentionally targeting civilians, the numbers would be very different. And even the numbers that Hamas is reporting, even using their numbers, and the amount we can trust Hamas is very is zero.
Right.
But even if you were to take their numbers, it's still the best ratio of terrorists to civilians in any urban combat zone in the world. The best in history is 1 to 9, and it's 1.18. 1 to 1.18 right now. Israel says they've killed about 12,000 Hamas terrorists. Using Hamas's numbers, the Gaza Health Ministry's numbers, they say 30,000 people have been killed, right? So that's 20. That's the balance of that, right? Is 28,000. 18,000. So it's 1 to like 1.7, 1.8, which is the best in the world. Is it great? No. Every civilian who's killed is terrible. But when Hamas is deliberately hiding in civilian infrastructures, in homes, in mosques, in hospitals, in UNRWAs, in schools, Israel has a choice, and it's a devil's choice, right? It's the worst choice you can make. Do we stop these terrorists who are trying to kill us, and there will be some civilian casualties, or not? It's very different than intentionally trying to kill civilians.
I mean, what I care about is, I feel like innocent people. I actually said it on one of the posts that I, put it out there. Like, what I care about is innocent people on both sides, and not only Palestinian side, but Israeli side too, because people who are behind the desk are the one that gives the command, but innocent people on the street are the one that who gets hurt. I mean, there's both sides. Both sides. There are a lot of innocent people are dying. I actually even said it. When you come to Hamas, I think as a Muslim, I don't understand why people are not more. I haven't even see like this. More people talks about Hamas, but our Prophet actually said this on a Shabbat, and our Prophet says, when we go to war, we have rules. You cannot kill babies, children. You cannot, even kill elderlies. You cannot even cut down trees or kill animals. So if you do anything against what our Prophet says, you don't represent true Islam. So I think what Hamas did, of course, is a pure terrorist attack, But same time, innocent people, I feel like I put it out there both sides. I put the Israeli kids out there and Palestinian kids out there, because that's what I care about. Because people are behind the desk who are going to make the decisions, but innocent people on the street, innocent civilians are the one who gets hurt. And they're the one who pays the heavy price. So what I care about, man, when I pray, actually, I pray on both sides.
But for sure, the kids have nothing to do with the war. Look, Jews, we pray for peace 3 times a day. You probably pray for peace 5 times a day. But it's explicitly in our prayers. And it's interesting, if you see even the marches of the Jews today around the world, if you understand what they're saying in Hebrew, it's all praying for peace. Like that's what we do. Now the narrative is different, because we know that peace comes through strength, right? And we're not going to be able to beg our way or nice our way out of this war. There's only one way to fight the war. But what I think is we have to be very careful. Of course, we care about innocent civilians and kids in particular. Everybody cares about kids, and we can change kids, and we can work with kids in education, and right, there's things that we can do with children. But I think it's important to be careful, because when we say that Israel is intentionally killing civilians or intentionally killing children, one or the other, or one and the same, it's not true. Well, A, it's false, but B, it's so harmful to the overall narrative, and it helps spur a lot of the anti-Semitism that we're seeing in the world, because people will latch on to these false narratives to confirm the biases that they already have. So that was sort of my qualm, but I see all the work you're doing, and you're all day. How am I going to join these communities? How are we going to bring people together? And you talk about true Islam. Look, there's we're seeing less and less of it, unfortunately, in Muslim countries. Now we're seeing some that are totally different. So what are your views on the Abraham Accords and seeing, the Gulf states of the world really trying to push and lean into the West and lean into Israel and lean into that sort of peaceful coexistence that you're looking for?
I mean, seeing this, some of these, Middle Eastern, countries becoming more, a bit open-minded and have, American investing values. I was blown away. I was, of course, very happy because many people have done right in those, countries. But now I hope with this kind of initiatives and with this kind of like programs or whatever, somehow we can waken the people up over there. And I mean, like I said again, man, at the end we are all human. We are all brothers and sisters. So I mean, I don't know how many Muslim countries are going to react to these kind of initiatives after October 7th. But all I'm saying is, man, I just hope that they will be more open-minded.
Yeah, well, my thought is that the gift Obama gave us was a strong Iran. And what that means is because he strengthened Iran so much, and Biden's now continuing that with the waiver of all the sanctions, it's causing, in a way, Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states to make sure to align with Israel to make sure that they have sort of a counter to the growing threat of China and Iran.
$6 billion.
Yes, and it doesn't stop. But it's, listen, these issues are complicated. They're super important, all of them. And when we're talking about these Gulf states, and each one of these states, which you alluded to, have their own issues with human rights. These aren't like free Western societies and Western democracies, which, by the way, may not be the prescription for every country in the world. I think that America sort of has that view where if we could bring democracy to the world, not all quiet, peaceful countries where people generally succeed are democracies. It's just the reality of the world. But sometimes we have to take the reality as it is, and like for Israel and the United States to help grow the Abraham Accords and change the dynamic of the Middle East and pressure the Palestinians, but also pressure countries like Turkey, right? They have to see an alternative. Right now it's China and Russia doing whatever they can to bring them into the fold. We need the U.S. and the West to try to be pushing them as well.
I'm so sick of hearing condemning. I'm so sick of hearing America says, "Oh, we condemn Turkey, we condemn their human rights violations, we condemn their support for Hamas." I'm like, dude, enough with the condemning, man, because they do not care. You have to take concrete actions. You have to either put sanctions because they are a NATO ally, yes, but they don't act like a NATO ally. They're literally going out there and shaking hands with Iran or Khomeini and stuff, So somehow we got to do something to, put a concrete action against these dictatorships.
Yeah, well, the first thing that you can do, and that you and I are both doing, and people at home should be able to do, is to speak out, right? And I think, and I said this last week on the podcast, but especially in a post-October 7th world, it should have been in a post-9/11 world. But at this point, once again, we're reminded of terrorist actors in this world, and that we shouldn't mince our words anymore. And we should be able to say things how they are. We should be able to have respectful conversations that are truthful, right? As opposed to right now in our society, we either lie or we ignore because we don't want to deal with the issue. But we can have respectful conversations, say things as they are. If a country supports terrorism, they support terrorism. Yeah. And we should say it. And we should say it's a country that supports terrorism, not that's an ally, that's a great country that's doing great things for the world.
Yep, country needs to be a little more careful. Like I think I remember it was 2 weeks before October 7th. I believe Israeli government met with Turkey and Erdogan, and I'm like, I cannot believe it. Erdogan is responsible for the death of thousands of Jewish people, and you guys are meeting now.
Yeah,
I did not understand. Maybe you know better.
I think we spoke about that.
Maybe you know better, but I was like blown away. How could you do that? I was shocked. Even or Biden, Biden goes and shakes hands with, Erdogan and gives pictures and smiles and all that stuff. And then, same time Erdogan goes and shakes hands with Iran or Russia. So I was like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so I actually remember, I think when that happened, I think we spoke. I don't know if we were in the same place or if you called me or I called you, but it's difficult and it's complicated. From my perspective, you don't make peace with your friends, you make peace with your enemies. And Turkey's a neighbor, an important neighbor, and they have to try to figure out a way to deal with them, just like Israel has to deal with Russia, because Russia has such a control over Syria. And without Israel having a real relationship with Russia, that spills over into Israel, and it really becomes catastrophic. So they have to deal with these actors. It turns out that most of Israel's neighbors aren't really good actors. So for them to deal with it, now it's not an excuse, but I'm just trying to think through that. For me, it's as long as they're honest about why they're meeting, and they're not trying to sugarcoat who they are and what they are. And it's incredible what you mentioned when Biden meets with them. When Biden meets with them, I find the opposite. I see the sugarcoating and the ignoring of the violations and who they really are. But anyways, this is the complicated world we live in, and I'm happy we live in it with people like you. Honestly, I don't care if we agree all the time on everything, because I don't agree with myself all the time on everything. But you have a good heart, and you do a lot of good things. And as if there's anything else you want to share before we wrap.
I think that was it. All I'm gonna say is, man, we only have one world to live. Doesn't matter Jewish, Muslim, Christian, black, white, Asian, whoever you are. We need to leave our differences on the table and try and find what we have in common, because we literally have one world to live in. And like as a teammates, we gotta figure it out somehow to make this world better. And I think it's gonna start from the bottom. So we have to start paying attention about the right education for the next generation.
Yeah, I love that. And I love we're now in a place where in the Jewish community, there's a lot of despair. What's next, right? What's next after the war? What's next after all this anti-Semitism? And that's why I was so excited when you called me. You're coming to Miami. I'm like, you got to come on the podcast, because I know for me, you represent hope. You represent, someone who's looking for solutions. And again, not the solution's going to fix every issue in the world, but move the ball forward and build relationships. And that's the work we have to do. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This was such an interesting conversation with my friend Enes Kanter Freedom. Thank you, Enes, for coming. Everyone, please support the show, like, follow, subscribe, all the things you do on all the different platforms. Thanks so much.